Welcome to Fearless Females, where ambition meets resilience. Meet your guide, Lorie Jones, president of Fidelis Wealth Advisors. Join her and remarkable women executives as they uncover the triumphs and transformative moments shaping extraordinary careers. Ready to be fearless? Let the journey begin.
Good morning, Fearless Females. Thank you so much for joining me again. I am always excited when I see our numbers growing and our listeners kind of engaging a little bit more and sharing it with their friends. Honestly, I think that this podcast is so personally inspiring to me as I hear these journeys of these amazing women that I really wish everyone in the whole world would listen. But I get that sometimes that isn't the case. But pass it on to those that could use just a little bit more positivity and inspiration in their lives. So today we get to talk with Sarah Shephard. And the most exciting thing out of her interview, I'm not going to lie, is the fact that she got an education, a degree in the great books. And I'm like, what in the heck even is that? Like, do you go to college and study great books? And she's like, yeah, that's what you do. And so she talked about, I actually have the great books collection on my bookshelf. My father-in-law, bless him, gave it to me one Christmas. And it's like 100 volumes of all the greatest literature in history. And I will admit, I have not read all of it. So she did an entire 4-year degree on the great books. And she just talked about the beauty of learning and the fact that it never ends. Every new challenge or question is an opportunity to grow, to seek knowledge, to find creative ways to help others. And the idea of immersing yourself in this sort of thinking and creativity and learning and knowledge is just fascinating to me. So she did a lot of other cool things, but I thought that was the coolest, neatest idea that she came up with. So let's get started and join Sarah Shephard. Good morning, and thank you for joining Fearless Females. I'm so excited today. We have Sarah Shephard. She's the president of Circuit Rider of Colorado, and she assures me that she's going to explain exactly what she does. So I'm excited to get to hear her journey. I thank you so much for being willing to do this for us, Sarah.
Thanks, Lorie. Yeah, I'm excited to be here.
So my first question is always my favorite. I love books. What's your favorite book?
You know, I have a real hard time answering an all-time favorite book. My education was in the great books. So I read a lot of books from the classics, right? Everything from ancient Greek philosophy and math and science all the way through more modern philosophy. And so whenever people ask me that question, I'm like, well, what's your interest? Because I bet I have a favorite in that vein, because I still read such a kind of wide berth of things. Like, for example, right now I'm reading a book about quantum mechanics and transactional mechanics. And also I'm reading Storyteller by Leslie Mormon Silko. So I guess I would say, maybe my favorite book in the last few years has been the book called Storyteller by Leslie Mormon Silko. It's a really wonderful novel about Laguna Pueblo Native integration with American white colonialism around the time of the Vietnam War, which Silko has been praised and criticized for, and sharing a lot of private tribal lore and traditions, as well as really revered for, sharing those stories and sharing the experience of those tribal Americans, So I really love her writing, and I hope, to spread the love. So if anyone hasn't heard of her or read her, that is a huge recommendation from me.
I love that. That kind of gets into the fact that, yeah, I like reading all sorts of different genres. I go through 2 or 3 year phases of one genre and then another genre and stuff like that. But But I love, my favorite thing is when my kids sit down and ask me, Mom, what's your favorite book? Because it always changes and there's always about 15 answers to that question. So I love reading other people. I love meeting other people who love to read too. So Sarah, tell us a little bit about your journey. Tell me about, how did you get started? How did you end up where you are today? And kind of, what do you do?
Yeah, thanks. So I love this question because I think it's a really good one for everyone to consider. I've had this question asked of me in my different roles where I serve clients, in my role as business owner and president, as all the different roles within all those roles, as a board member to nonprofits and founder of different organizations. And it's as if there's some like secret sauce that like, if I do what they did, I will get from point A to point B. And I really like to share the mixed up, muddled journeys that we all have. For me, at least, that is a really good way to say, A to B plus luck plus environment plus other humans plus help is how we get where we are, with a little bit of magic or luck and a little bit of hopefully our own wisdom and decisiveness coming in at times, right? So so where I am today, having owned a business for almost 20 years now, and still being like a little bit of a baby in the world of, having done that for my age, is really having had a wonderful liberal arts education in my undergraduate experience, and learning to learn and being interested in always learning from others, and then finding places that spark the excitement for a creative investment and little, kind of modulation where I can help in those ways with my experience, training, education, and also just being willing to keep learning and see where the path takes me, because I wouldn't have expected that I would be here when I started out. And I remember specifically a young woman mentee asking me at one point, how did you become the executive director of this nonprofit I was running at the time? And I said, well, here's my story. And she's like, but how did that happen? How did that translate? And I just said, I was open and willing to help, and said I was willing to help, and then showed up and learned in the ways I needed to. And, first figuring out the general information I needed, and then figuring out all the things I didn't know in those specific areas, and being willing to go, I don't know that, and dive in and become an expert.
So what was your education? You said you had a liberal arts education.
Yeah. So liberal arts, and in kind of I guess I would think it's an interesting take on liberal arts. I went to a school called St. John's College. There's a campus in Annapolis, Maryland, and one in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And I studied the great books. So I studied the canon of Western philosophy, which translates into, all these kind of various degrees of philosophy and history of mathematics. And I studied ancient Greek, and I studied French and music and art. And all those things added up to, I now feel like I can start sorting out a way to approach learning of almost anything and apply it to, if I feel like I need to learn a code or how to build a website, I can learn some of those basics. And then I can also work in teams and build a team to help with the things I don't know, and lead them from a space of learning. So so that education, I've served on the board for St. John's for 6 years now. I've actually turned off of that board just recently, and it was such a wonderful opportunity to be of service to the program that really made me a well-rounded thinking human And in some ways, it's a conservative program because the program itself, the books that we read there are still, 25 years later, for me, what students who are there today are reading. My class was very small. About 65 people graduated in my class, and it's about the same today. So people are getting that experience reading Aristotle and Plato all the way up to reading Einstein and Heidegger and everything in between, American novels, reading the Declaration of Independence, reading all sorts of American and Western philosophy and literature, and talking about it together, and then thinking and writing papers about it. So it really helps people become articulate thinkers and helpers in whatever team they're going to end up working with. And such a range of experiences and expertise of, even people who served on the board with me have such a wide range of professions. And beyond that, people with whom I graduated are doing amazing things in wide varieties of fields. So
I can imagine. That's so interesting though. Like you go to school and you're like, okay, I'm going to study the great books, great literature, and then I'm going to be blah. What do you say? I'm going to be blah with that kind of a degree. Like, how did your career go? How did your journey?
Yeah. Well, that first year out of school, a lot of students, and I think this happens generally, everyone comes out and they go, oh, blah, that was really an experience, right? My undergrad or, vocational school, I learned so much. It was exciting. I felt inspired. I met friends. I had this adult experience of, building networks and building resources. And now I'm out in the quote unquote real world. Mm-hmm. And what happens in college is the real world. And it's a mini experience of what happens as an adult. It's just, it takes more from yourself and other resources when you're out in the world to forge those networks and build off of them. You have a nice, built-in environment you get to walk into in that community at a college. And so a lot of the students left, and we all, I remember at least a group of my friends and I went, what do we do next? And so we did college things. We worked at restaurants, we worked at bakeries, coffee houses, we philosophized on the side. I worked at art galleries and studied the philosophy of aesthetics in some master's work afterward, and was considering working in museum studies and things, for example, at the Denver Art Museum. And I ended up coming home. I had a family event where my parents were divorcing and I needed to come home after college and after those wonderful experiences. And, took a pause, didn't know what I was going to do, and helped my dad open a business. And then he retired from the business and I bought the business from him. And, I was working the business with its clients. I was serving as the executive director of another nonprofit org, helping it build and develop. And then the business kept growing and my team kept growing, and I was learning things about how to build my team and work with my client teams. And it has just flowed from there. So again, I had no idea how I would end up where I am. So that's the kind of gooseneck pathway, right? Like it flows upriver sometimes and around straight fence to get where you're going.
So if you can look back and think over your journey, what's the best investment you made in yourself during that journey? Was there anything you can say, oh, I'm so glad I did that?
Well, for me, going to that college, it actually still boasts it's this contrarian college where it is not step into this college and we will put you on a path to become, this professional, you'll make this much money in your life, and that is your goal as a human. It allows you to define your goal as a human and a citizen in the world and in our country. And that's a difficult thing as a teenager or young adult to go through. But I kind of fought tooth and nail to do that in some ways with my family. They thought, you have a scholarship at a nice 4-year university. You won't come out with any student debt. What are you doing? Why are you going there to kind of torture yourself through all these really challenging courses? And whatever my very young, mind and wisdom had, there was something in there that I didn't even know. And so I think that was a huge investment in myself. And I was really glad to pay off my student loans as quickly as I could. But I would say that education as a theme is something that it's just ongoing. And so whenever I come up with a client and they have an issue they need my guidance on, and I have a gap, I look at what resources there are to fill that. And that's usually going out to get some education for myself and some help from others.
Mm-hmm.
So it may be formal or informal, but I might be going to do a continuing education course. It could be in a field totally far flung from what I typically do. It could be that I should be getting a master gardener degree. It could be that I should be studying different types of practices for revegetating plains, grasslands in Colorado. Could be water law and things I need to understand and learn to help my clients with their funding. It could be board education. So, taking the ACEs course. I work with boards all the time, and it just allows me to, kind of indulge myself in continuing to learn forever, because there's always something that I can be learning to do better. Learning election law and ways to best practice and oversee elections in my role as an election official for Colorado local government, and then teaching others. So, education, I think, is the theme, whether I'm sharing or, being the sponge to absorb and then share later and benefit others.
Yeah, I love that. I do love the idea of learning. That's how come I love reading so much is you can find yourself some vast amount of human knowledge available at our fingertips is just unfathomable if you look through history. So I love that idea of learning and constantly learning. Did you, Sarah, get any really bad advice along this journey? And did you take it? Did you not take it? What did you learn from it?
Oh, wow. I feel like there's some advice that you can tell is coming from someone's own regrets or agenda. And I think that I definitely have taken advice that I think was kind of meant for someone else to give to their past self, maybe their younger self, maybe someone else. And it's about a concern or a goal that maybe they have that I don't share.
Mm-hmm.
And as I've grown up, I try to center myself with, is this advice related to something that this person and I have a common goal with? Is it related to a goal I have? And if not, can I let that go as kind of an unsolicited advice that, thank you, but I can release it and let it go. I definitely have had, I think, some, just ideas of past requirements for readiness. Generally, I've received it from my mentors who may be kind of holding on to the bars and hoops, they had to jump over or through in the past. And thankfully, as a woman, maybe they've actually paved the way that I don't have to do the same type of hoop jumping. And in sharing that, it might create, some type of mental barrier where I go, oh, I'm not ready for this. And I think that's a common theme still for women that we talk about in the ACEs program and lots of places, which is, why do I create this barrier no one else has created for me? So that's something just generally that I would say, don't take that advice. If someone is creating a barrier, or you are with your own narrative in your head, maybe say no thanks to that. And or check it. Like, it might be true, but maybe not. Like, you may not. One example was like when I bought my first home, the narrative out there is like, you have to have 20% down payment on your home. And that's a good guideline. And maybe in the past, you absolutely needed to do that. But in our case, we saved and had that. And we absolutely didn't need it. Like in the market we were in, when we were making an offer, our realtor was like, wow, you're putting that much down. And we were like, well, we thought we had to. And she said, no, who told you that? So it's just things like that, that it's like, who is saying that? Where'd you get that information? Like, check your sources.
That's really a good thought, to kind of look and say, hey, this is the piece of advice I'm getting. Is it valid for me? Like, is this coming from someone else's experience or a past experience that maybe would have been valid for that person or that situation, but may not be what I need or what I'm going through. And it's really hard sometimes, I think, to discern, especially when you're young, whether because a lot of times you do look up to these mentors or these people who are giving you advice, and it's really hard to trust your gut or kind of hear their experiences and not internalize it. Instead, really critically think about, hey, is this something that I should take in and absorb or not? I love that.
Absolutely. Well said.
So what about looking back on your journey? Is there a situation that you went through or something that you tried where you're like, looking back on it today going, gosh, if I knew now or knew then what I know now, would I have done that differently? Or I definitely would have done that differently.
Yeah, I have been reflecting on this because it is another thematic thing we've been talking about today. It's an ongoing journey that when you're ready for a new challenge, a new task, a new adventure, whether it feels fun or not so fun at the time, you're there at at that threshold. And, this year with some board appointments and things I've been serving on, there have been some tough things that we've come up against. And it can feel, when you're in a world right now that feels very, in some ways, agitated and not in a mood to cooperate and align, or at least try to figure out a pathway to communicate as a first step. It can feel very challenging and lonely to be the one or in a group of folks who are really trying to move that type of style of cooperation forward. And I think that that's a lesson that I need to constantly remind myself when I hit these new thresholds of learning and go, okay, you're here because you probably have the tools or you can get them, and there are people out here to help you. And it may feel lonely because it's sometimes easier to not maintain that ethic of wanting to be cooperative, professional, bring some moderation and to the table. So I think that's really important in this day and age. In so many domains of life, we see a lot of examples of it not going well in social media, in politics. I think it goes well in a lot of cases because so much is going right in our world, but we don't celebrate that. And I think a lot of people who hold those spaces and are moving them forward can feel lonely in them because it is easier to complain or to get in groups where it's like, let's criticize this, let's yell, let's, kind of troll or whatever the language is around it. Let's exit. Let's have ultimatums versus heal and cooperate and try to move forward. So yeah, that's something that I was really thinking about with this question. I don't know if that is a great answer, but it's the one that I was coming to. So
no, I think that's really insightful. I think that's important, that sometimes it's really difficult to stay true to your values, your morals, your beliefs, your goals, what you're trying to accomplish, when it's easier just to follow the flow. And yeah, it's hard to be constantly optimistic or have energy or work on communication when it's easier to be pessimistic and complain. I was just saying today, I actually was telling one of my team, I'm like, I'm dealing with a difficult situation with one of our vendors, and I'm on the phone with them for like 45 minutes in the morning. And I said, they're turning me into someone I don't want to be. I'm this grumpy person on the phone with them every single morning. And I'm not a grumpy. I'm happy. I'm cooperative. I'm, helpful, and they're turning me into this person I don't want to be. So I am the exact example of someone who's doing something, that's easier rather than holding to my standards. So you've inspired me. I'm gonna do better on the phone with that company.
Well, and it's just not easy. And, sometimes reflecting back to them, right? Like you were saying, it can be like, hey, I realize that I struggle with you whenever we talk, and maybe just being really blunt about it. I don't want to bring that anymore. Is there a way through? And then if there isn't, maybe that's the time to just say, we're complete. Like maybe there's something else that is better. That's also a challenge, right? I think as women too, we're socialized in a lot of ways that moving on is a failure of our making. If we haven't, muscled our way through that, it's our fault. We have maybe the majority responsibility for it, especially, with success. And that's not always true. And so I think a kindness to ourselves and to others is to just also decide, hey, this is done for now, and we'll find that some other pathways, and maybe we revisit that in the future. Because you don't want to hold that grump, or there's some ease, and that's a good validation. It doesn't always feel easy, but sometimes when you identify it and move through, you can go, okay, yeah, we got through that rocky spot, and here's why it was valuable for us, and now we're on the other side. Or nope, not happening.
Yeah. We're going to go a different direction with this. Yeah, I love that. That's really good, and food for thought too. I think just really to kind of dig into that and think on whether we do. I tend to agree with you. As women, a lot of times, if we can't get through a situation, it may not be good for us to get through the situation. It might be better to put it aside and go a different direction, but it does always feel, at least to me, a lot of times it feels like a failure on my part. And being kind to ourselves and saying, hey, this isn't a failure. We probably learned something from it, but I have one of those in my past where I'm constantly looking back, and I need to just say that situation wasn't ever meant to happen. I need to let it go and not consider it a failure in my life, because it wasn't. What about if you could go back and talk to your younger self, 20, 21, 22, just younger on the beginning of your journey? Is there a piece of advice or something you'd tell her?
Yeah. I still tell myself this, that it's not all about you, right? And that's not, it wasn't that I was a selfish person. It was that I actually put way too much responsibility on my shoulders, kind of in line with the last question. I thought I could do anything or everything, even worse. And what I've learned is I can do a lot, and I can do it with other people and with a shared goal and story and ethic. And that it's a lot more fun and more impactful in the world if it is with a team. So that's what I would probably say to myself is, you don't have to do, like, if no one else is there showing up, try it, but don't feel like it means you have to do that forever, and that you're going to be overwhelmed and have to, again, muscle it through forever. Like in another interview I did, we talked about the fact that we are all aspects of our world. We're not the center of the world. We have that experience because we're embodied with this experience of our mind and our brain and our body, which is such a wonderful gift. But we're an aspect of all of the goals we have in the world, all the teams, all the, career journey, personal journey with our families, with our hobbies, with sports, whatever it is we do, we're an aspect of that. We're part of the environment and our world and our culture and our time. As much as sometimes we might love that or not, we're there in it, and we're influenced by it, and we have some small, influence possible. And so having a team that values you and helps lift up the gifts that you have is one of the best gifts you can give yourself, is and not trying to do everything for everyone in all ways. So
yeah, I think it's going to take me probably the rest of my life to learn that lesson.
oh yeah. Yeah, I have I yeah. You're so right. So I will call you up, and if anytime you need that reminder, and you vice versa, call me up and say, Sarah, how are you doing with that? Are you being an aspect today of your experience in the world, or are you trying to do it all? Because check your stuff.
Yeah, yeah. If we could just collectively, all as women, help each other out with that. I love that idea. I do. That's great, and it's good advice for no matter what stage you're at. But definitely starting out, you just tend to think you can and should and will take on the world. It, it's hard to. That's a hard lesson to learn, but it's so important, because if not, that's why there's so much burnout in women, I think. What about something scary? Did anything scare you when you started out on this journey, and does it still scare you, or did you learn how to work with it?
Yeah, what still motivates me is thinking about my team, thinking about my world, and I'm a person who really orients toward far future thinking. So not everyone shares this kind of worldview, and it's, one of the insights into my wild brain. But for a while, I was like, I have a real hard time with the fact that our universe is like decaying, and entropy is happening. No one cares about that in their daily life. And my husband said, what is your deal? Why do you care that millennia from today, when you're not around, no one that we know, who knows what the world and the universe looks like, you care that this is all, folding and, deconstructing? And then I, started studying and reading about multiverse theory. And I was like, oh, I feel so much better to know that, that these things are all happening in space and time. And it's also, not for nothing that we're, on these journeys and working together. But as silly as that sounds, it tracks back to the fact that I have a great care for the future of us as humans and our world. And I know how, as one human in a team, different teams that I'm associated with and get to, play with and help, that's a very, very tiny, tiny, tiny drop in the huge bucket. And so that, to me, I had this fear and scary feeling about the world and what we're leaving behind for everyone. But what I've done to reorient around it is think about the care of the teams I work with. And so I can focus that on all of our mutual goals being attended to. And I can't do all of them for all of my staff members or board colleagues, et cetera, but I can know what they are, and I can ask them and inquire about it, so that as much as possible, the work we do together can mutually fulfill those. And that really helps a lot of things turn out, because then we really start thinking about not just ourselves, but the teamwork and how the collective teamwork in our society and environment need us to act in ways that create a future that's healthy and sustainable, in terms of how we interact with the environment and with one another. So, yeah. Aside from mold and mice, which we talked about outside of this call.
Yeah, I'm terrified of mice. Mold is scary too. I think that's interesting. I think that it kind of goes to, sometimes I worry about, the universe as a whole. I will admit I spent zero time thinking about what, the big wide world is going to end up being. But I do think about, I'm just one person. How can I make a difference in this world? And there's all these really, really big problems out there. But I do think that one voice in your own little community, in your own little sphere, if you can practice positivity, if you can help others meet their goals and be a positive influence, like that's what you're talking about, right? Is like making a difference in your little sphere. And then that little sphere makes a difference in a bigger sphere. And pretty soon you are making a difference in the world.
Yeah. And building off that, I bring that positive orientation, this kind of big picture thinking, which is sometimes not helpful, right? Like sometimes if we're really having to look at like, what can we do in this amount of time with these resources? Like, Sarah, do not tell us what's happening in 20 years. My team will be like, no, stop it, wrong time. And so it's really good to have those complementary people who rely on me when that time comes for me to inject that type of positivity and the story and the inspiration. And then they tie everything down and, get stuff done or check my numbers, make sure we all, deliver things on time, look good, please our clients. And, so all those things really come into play in a beautiful complementary way. And so valuing people who aren't like you, I think is a huge one that we don't always celebrate that in our, in this flow right now. Like we kind of look at you're like me and I celebrate that. And visionary people are celebrated or people who always knew what they wanted. So I love to put my messy story out there. Like I love that you ask that.
Yeah, I do. It's my partner, my business partner, and I are complete opposites in exactly that way. He's always thinking up these big ideas, and I'm like, okay, but how are we going to get this checklist finished? And I do love that you have those other personalities and those other talents to play off of in work and in life. And I think the world would be a much poorer place if there was only one person, one kind of person. I love that we celebrate that sort of diversity.
Oh, yeah. Oh, checklist. I love hearing that. I'm like, oh, you and I together could move mountains.
Yeah.
Through checklist.
Exactly.
Love it.
So what about unique challenges on your journey? Have you faced some unique challenges because you were a woman?
Absolutely. Yep. I reflect again on where I stand today as a woman and the things I haven't had to deal with. I've talked with my mother about the fact that she was not able to go to college without her father signing her student loan paperwork.
Yeah.
And she couldn't open a bank account on her own as an adult woman over the age of 18. She couldn't have her own bank account until her dad helped her out with that. She had a dad who obliged her to do those things. Not everyone did. Those are the times of Title IX coming into effect, lots and lots of social shifting around women in the workplace, women with children in the workplace, what it means to be a woman overall. And so I really am grateful for the challenges I get to have now that aren't so big, but they're still there. As a woman, and especially a young woman business owner, I'm often still today, I wonder how old I have to be to not be, talked down to. I had a recent meeting with a new board client and board members. I brought my CFO with me, who's older than I and a man. They assumed he was the owner of the business and that we were married on top of it, right? And so these things just, they continue. And so I acknowledge them and I see when they're happening. And I kind of then, work with the groups I have to laugh about it and try to barrel through it without taking it on as something personal to me, but also something that ought to be corrected for the next generation. So our next generation has different problems to work on.
Yeah. They've got a lot they got to fix. So if we can help them out, like I agree, like those that came before us helped us out, like they forged the path into a lot of these different professions. They got a toehold in, they got bank accounts and, even before that, you were looking at women who were fighting for the vote and things like that. So I feel like we stand on the shoulders of giants and we can reach down and help those out who are coming after us. And, that it's women's problems are not the only problems out there. There are problems because you're a minority. There's problems because there's lots of different issues. I just choose to focus on helping little girls achieve their dreams. That's all.
Yep. Yep. And that's one that we need to put a hand back and kind of, passing a baton or reaching down to bring someone up and kind of stand on our shoulders next. And, recognize the ways that we have had that disadvantage and tell that story, but don't own that story, right? So I love to hear the wisdom of generations 10, 20, 30 years older than me so I can hear their stories and appreciate what they went through, and then also have them appreciate what I'm going through. So it's not better than or less than, right? Like they're like, oh, you are, you have way less challenging problems. Yeah. Well, not really. Like it's
different.
It's a gradient, and we're all doing it to try to make things better for the diverse identities to have fewer barriers. And that's our hand back to them.
I love that. And I love the visual of like putting your hand back and lifting up and helping and just being that force for good in those lives. And I have appreciated those that have done that for me in my life and want to be that person for someone else. So what about Sarah, what's the thing you are most proud of?
Well, I have a lot of things I'm proud of in my work life. I have things in my personal life I'm really proud of. Maybe I'll share one of those just to kind of put some extra facets on me. I'm really proud to have rode a raft down the Grand Canyon several times by myself. And that is an accomplishment for me. It's, one of the most challenging rivers in the world. And so it's one that I feel proud of, and I love doing it too. So it's a really happy place for me, and something I love to continue learning about that type of, skill and doing it over and over again. So a huge privileged thing I've gotten to do and been in a place so beautiful. So I always like to mention something like that to encourage people to have, those goals outside of career. I think that there are all these milestones. And again, I'm future oriented. So I love your asking this because it helps me get out of the future and look back and think about those things. I've been helping a community recently that has contamination in their water supply. And we're now, we've sourced multi-millions of dollars for a really small community that couldn't drink their water. And in about 8 months, we're going to have a party where we all drink the water from their water system.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And those are things that, I get the opportunity because I work with so many communities. I get the opportunity to do those things a lot. And so, we have a lot of clients and we're like, wow, this is happening and this is moving forward with that client. And so I think that the achievement of my team and organization, working with boards and getting big things done in service of their communities in, necessary things like water supply, everywhere from that to emergency services like fire protection or even parks and recreation, right? Like all these things, if they need their trash hauled away, these are things that we rely on every day so that everyone can go out and do the things that they need to do in the world too. So that building of that team and being able to deliver to each of those clients the things that they really need for their community, that feels like an achievement too, even though a small one. So everything from big, a big personal one to being a part of a team that can achieve big things for these communities is a great one.
Oh, I love that. You can't really go out and be your best self if you can't even get a drink of water, right? So that's great. And I love to hear that you're making those amazing contributions to the world. We need people that are visionary and can kind of make those big changes. So I'm proud of you too. Any advice for a young woman starting down on a path that you've already traveled? Is there anything you would say to her at the beginning of her journey?
Yeah, the beginning of the journey. I guess from my perspective, this is if someone out there is listening and you identify kind of in the way that I orient in the world, you might have some similar tendencies that I had when I was starting out, which is, got to know what's going to happen in the future, or really trying to force or plan things. And so I think to some degree it would be to, know how powerful you are, and also I'm not sure how to phrase it, but knowing how powerful you are is really valuable. And it's also in relationship to knowing that you don't have to use all of it up all at once. So, this is a long game of life for some that are lucky. And, being open to all the things that might come your way, and, not feeling like, again, you have too much on your shoulders, or, you have to guide and direct things more than you really do have the power to control, because it's a complicated world and there are a lot of people out there doing a lot of things. They don't know or care much about you, even though they should, So, yep.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Thanks for spending the time with us today and for sharing your journey and just your experiences. I've really appreciated it. If we have listeners who wanted to get a hold of you and ask some questions, or just ask, more about your experience, how do they get in touch with you?
Yeah, so I can give you my website. It's www.ccrider.us. There's info to contact me there. And yeah, that's a great way. There's email info, phone info to reach out. The other way I would offer is to look up the ACEs program, and there are good ways to get in touch with me through those channels and networks as well. And I'm on LinkedIn too, so you can look me up, Sarah Shephard, and I would love to chat with anyone. So I really appreciate this, Lorie. It was so fun.
Well, thanks. Thank you so much. I appreciate it as well.
And you all can't see this, Lorie. Can I just say, Lorie and I are wearing matching striped linen. I think linen, but I can't. Yeah, linen shirts that are beautiful today. And it's been very fun to look at her blue and white, and I have green and white today. So,
right. We're twinners, great minds and all that. So perfect. Thank you. Thanks, Sarah. I appreciate it.